Let us quiet ourselves for a moment of prayer. Spirit of life, be with us in this quiet time. Help us to quiet our minds and slow our breathing so that we may become more in tune with the creaking of the pew bench and the sound of our own breath and the presence of our neighbors. Spirit of life, be with us in the hectic times. Help us to partake of life's whirlwind when we are in it. Let us feel like we are part of life's loud living and noisy expression. Help us to feel the blood rushing through our bodies, reminding us that we are alive. Spirit of life, be with us in the anxious times. Help us to breathe deeply and exhale slowly. Help us to feel grounded and connected to the earth, to our inner core, and to each other. Steady us. Spirit of life, be with us through all of this, the quiet and the noise and the anxiety and the letting go. Be with us especially in the letting go. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Reverend Jane Jepka. One October day, just before dinner, in a bit of a rush, my son Toby, then aged 5, and I went up to the attic to find Halloween costumes. My husband shouted up that he and Adam would make a run to the grocery store to do a quick cart's worth of shopping. Toby and I unpacked the clown, the witch, and superhero suits, anxious to establish our new identities before it got any colder or darker, there being no heat or lights in our attic. Chuck ran to get his wallet, momentarily folding up the attic stairs as he went by. Well, it should have been momentarily. It was perfectly quiet downstairs. Soon it was perfectly dark in the attic. There was no way to get the ladder unfolded from above. The phone rang. The paper boy came to collect. The dog needed to go out. The water for the broccoli had boiled away. I had a whole hour to think of an appropriate reaction to my husband when he walked in the door. Revenge crossed my mind. I could somehow lure him into the attic and close it and see how he liked it. Good old-fashioned, ancient Greek-type blood revenge. Or perhaps a little ancient Hebrew eye for an eye proportional retribution along the lines of domestic sabotage, raw egg in the picnic lunch, salt in the sugar bowl, that kind of thing. Then there was Jesus' option, forgiveness. I could just say, "No problem, Chuck. I've never had the opportunity to spend some quiet, dark moments with Toby in our attic before." Sometimes it's best just to forget. No energy spent on revenge. No energy spent on forgiving either. A laugh later, maybe. Nothing more. And it all slips away. In June of this year, I was able to participate in the 2012 General Assembly of our Unitarian Universalist Association. Each year, thousands of UUs gather at General Assembly to come together in worship and fellowship, to conduct the business of the denomination, and to attend workshops, panel discussions, and trainings to strengthen our individual and collective faith. This annual meeting moves around the country, hopping coasts and surprising cities all over the United States with our collective presence. Planning is done years in advance. And so, years ago, Phoenix, Arizona was picked for the 2012 GA, and reservations were made. When stories began to flood the media about SB 1070, the Arizona law that encouraged racial profiling among its other methods of cracking down on undocumented immigrants, Unitarian Universalists across the country took notice. Border deaths, private prisons, corrupt elected officials, and forced family separations raised our level of concern. While there's no comprehensive UU statement on immigration policy, the UUA has made several statements over the years about the social justice and human rights concerns relating to immigration policy, calls for due process, and a moratorium on federal raids. So when UUs began to learn more about Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his brutal and corrupt practices around immigration, UUs called to boycott Phoenix. It seemed like a powerful way to state our objection to this state law and the corresponding human rights violations. But our brothers and sisters in Arizona begged us not to pull out of Phoenix. Come, they said, please come and stand with us in this struggle for justice. And so it was decided that we would indeed gather in Phoenix, but that we would dispense with business as usual. This would be a Justice General Assembly. We would spend the week studying about immigration. Our workshops would be about multiculturalism, how to effectively and respectfully work with partner organizations, and how to get involved with immigration issues in our own communities. There were inspiring worship services all week in English and in Spanish. And all week, this Justice GA was building towards the culminating witness event on Saturday night, a vigil protest outside of Phoenix's outdoor tented jails, where detained immigrants and others are housed in temperatures of up to 130 degrees with little food or water. All week, we were working toward this act of witness as part of a Unitarian Universalist Standing on the Side of Love campaign. This tagline, Standing on the Side of Love, emblazoned on bright yellow t-shirts, has been our UU message in the battle for marriage equality, for peace, for human rights, and now it was our message to Sheriff Arpaio. I plunked down my $20 for one of the hideously colored shirts, putting aside my fashion sense to be part of a mustard yellow wave of love. By all accounts, the witness at the Tent City Jail was amazing. In 100-degree heat, thousands of yellow-shirted UUs stood alongside local organizers, Barrios Defense Committee, Promise Arizona, Puente, and Somos America, singing, chanting, raising electric candles in the dark sky as police stood by and as prisoners waved from the slits in the bottom of the tents. Colleagues said to me afterwards, "It was the most touching experience I've ever had." One said, "I have to admit, I've become a real cynic in my life, but tonight reminded me of why I became a minister." The story of this witness event was going to be my sermon to you all this morning, how it felt with the oppressive heat of the night beating down and radiating up from the ground, the additional warmth created by a feeling of solidarity with those families who have been torn apart, what it felt like to chant along with thousands of other people, all acting out our faith. And those hands sticking out beneath the tent, waving. This was going to be my sermon to you this morning, but it is not, because after filing out of the worship hall in that sea of yellow, electric candle in hand, and after marching through the convention center chanting, "We are marching in the light of love, we are marching in the light of love," after pouring en masse out onto the sidewalk and taking my place in the overwhelming line for the school buses, also yellow, that the organization had rented, after watching the first round of buses fill and waiting for an hour in the hot Arizona night for them to return, after watching the second round of buses pull up and fill with our numbers, after monitoring my hydration levels carefully and watching eagerly for the next bus, after all of this, Ginny Corder, the UUA moderator, came through the line to make an announcement. The buses were full. The permit capacity had been reached. There would be no more buses to Tent City, and the 100 or 200 of us left really had been left behind. I know I'm a minister, and I'm supposed to have deeper reserves of acceptance and understanding than the average bear, but boy was I disappointed and angry. "I need you to be okay with this," said Ginny to the crowd. And to be completely honest with you, I fought back tears in the hot Arizona night. It felt a little shameful, crying at my own missed opportunity when the people we were going to stand in solidarity with were missing their whole lives in that jail, missing their babies being born and their mothers dying. But I was overwhelmed by the feeling of missing out on something so big, so beautiful. I was missing out on the great sermon I was going to write about how I had been transformed under the Arizona sky and how my yearning for justice had been strengthened and fed, along with thousands of other UUs and UU ministers at the vigil. They asked us to have a solidarity vigil back inside of our GA building, but somehow holding a candle up in the air-conditioned bowels of the Phoenix Convention Center with no one to see us just didn't feel as meaningful. I began to resent the $20 I had spent on the shirt. As others sang, 5 of us slipped out of the solidarity vigil to go to a hotel bar across the street. We would raise a toast to the protesters we justified. And in the company of good friends, the disappointment and the anger abated some. Sweet potato French fries helped. But it was hard to let go. And when 2 hours later that flood of yellow shirts began to trickle and then flood into the bar with their exhilarated faces and their overflowing hearts, the bitterness returned. On my walk back to my own hotel, I made friends with the bitterness and invited it to stay and settle in. I didn't have the stories of the night to hold on to and bring home, but I had my disappointment, and I clung to it. This is not the proud sermon I was planning to give today, but it's honest. It's honest, and I'm giving it because I know that there are things that you have been holding on to too. Disappointments and anger and losses that have settled in, made themselves at home in your hearts. And friends, these things we hold on to are not serving us well. These things we hold on to are eating us up from the inside. We are feeding them, but they are not feeding us. I remember a sermon by Kim Crawford Harvey in which she said, "Holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die." Our disappointment in life, in other people, in ourselves, is not serving us well. Our despair and frustration and anger are weighing us down. Our judgments of others are not hurting them as much as they are hurting us. There is a Buddhist teaching story that goes like this. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together by foot. At one point, they came to a river with a strong current. As the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a very young and very beautiful woman also attempting to cross. Overwhelmed by the current, the young woman asked if they could help her. Without hesitating, the senior monk picked the woman up, balanced her over his shoulders, and forded the river, letting her down gently on the other bank. The junior monk looked on in shock, but said nothing. When all three were across, the monks continued on their journey, the younger one still mulling over what had happened. After several hours of silence, the senior monk finally said to his companion, "Is something the matter? You seem very upset." The junior monk replied, "As monks, we are not permitted to touch a woman. How could you carry that woman on your shoulders like that?" The senior monk replied, "I put down that woman a long time ago at the bank. You, however, seem to be carrying her still." In my cab ride to the airport, at the end of General Assembly, I struck up a conversation with the cab driver who was Mexican American. It wasn't hard. He was chatty. "Are you here for the conference?" he asked me. I was surprised that he had heard of us. "Yes," I said, "I'm from Boston. I can't quite get over this Phoenix heat." "You're crazy to come here at the end of June," he said. "It's hot this month. I've lived here all my life and I still hate it." I was fumbling around with my flight itinerary in the back seat when he asked from the front, "Were you at the rally last night?" "No," I said, the hurt bubbling up a little bit again. "I tried to go. I wanted so much to be there. There weren't enough buses," I said. "Oh," he said, "I was there." "You were?" I asked. In my head, I also asked, how come even my cab driver was at this UU rally when I couldn't get there? "I met a minister from Ohio who invited me," he said. "I liked it." My head was still reeling. "It was good to be there," he said. "I have 2 friends in there." My heart began to melt a little. Of course he was there, should be there. He had 2 friends in there. The cab driver, even with all our talking, I didn't catch his name, continued to tell me about how bad it is now in Arizona, how mistreated the people in the tent city jail are. I'd understand more if they were criminals, he said, but it's just that they don't have papers. He told me about the state of affairs for immigrants and Latinos in Phoenix, about his 2 friends and others. He also told me how next month he is taking his 2 children to Disneyland and how excited they all are. Soon we were at the airport saying goodbye. But I think back to those two questions. Are you here for the conference? And were you at the rally last night? And the hope I heard in his voice. The hope that this woman from Boston had come to see what was happening and was going to take the story of his community back with her. I may have missed the big moment there in Phoenix, but a quiet witness of solidarity did take place in the back of that taxi cab on my ride to the airport. And that cab ride and 5 hours of contemplation on my flight back to Boston helped me let go of my disappointment and to make room in my heart for what was more important and life-giving. I don't know what it is that each of you may be holding on to. And I'm not here to rush you through the steps of grief or to diminish the powerful grip of your feelings that have come out of your own lived experiences. I hope that my example doesn't trivialize this journey we are all on. Letting go is not easy, but we can help each other with it. Letting go is not easy, but it's a lot easier to relax your grip if you know that you have a hand to hold once you have let go. Letting go is not easy, but it's within your realm of capability. I'm not sure if you're up for it, but I do know you're able for it. We have within ourselves a joy, a peace, a love that is just waiting to fill the spaces in us that are being taken up by fear and bitterness and grief. We have within ourselves a growing light just yearning to outshine the darkness if we will allow it, if we will nurture it, if we will feed it by standing on the side of love. Amen, and blessed be.